Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are today. I hope all of you are safe and well with all the things that's going around the world today. Today's webinar is focusing on a set of threads that will be discussing about risk, and we are living in an unprecedented time with a lot of uncertainties, which is all risk management is all about. Our focus today is going to be why use the RACI metrics to manage the stakeholders. And I'm sure some of you may have heard of this term, have practiced it or used it in some shape or form. But I'm going to bring how to use this metrics correctly, as well as some of the foundational principles behind why we should use this. So let's move forward. So for some of you that have already seen a number of my webinars, I am Sriram Rajagopalan. For those of you that do not know me, I currently work as an enterprise agile evangelist with Inflectra, and I have my Ph.D. in organizational leadership through project management, MBA in management, master's in computer engineering, and a bachelorate in electronics and communication engineering. I also have started my career like many members with a software engineering background, and then moved along as managing teams, managing businesses, projects, and in the capacity of Scrum Master, Agile Coach, Director, and Vice President as well. A number of different certifications to my credentials, which include portfolio management, program management, project management, schedule, risk, agile, Scrum Master, Scrum Product Owner, Agile Coach, Six Sigma, Black Belts, Sarbanes-Oxley certification, all those things. I'm also an instructional designer, speaker, writer, and author. I have experience facilitating both, adult learning experience classes as well as corporate training classes in a number of institutions throughout the world, which include US, India, United Kingdom, Canada, Switzerland, Brazil, Vietnam, and a number of other places. That's in a nutshell about me. And the book that I have recently published is more about organized common sense. It's about how project management skills apply to everyone, and they focus on how it's a life skill, and also about regardless of which particular field of choice you are working in, it still applies. So I give a lot of information relating to that. We are in the fifth webinar series right now, and this fifth webinar series has a three-part series. And we will be talking about each and every one of them for about an hour, and we will reserve questions at the end. I will not be monitoring the questions until the end of the webinar, so if you have a thought, just put it on the chat window, and towards the end I will try to pick it up. Sometimes I try to bring a tool to evaluate or to emphasize the concepts. In this particular webinar, I'm not going to do one. Okay, so the three-part series here are, today we are focusing on why use a RACI to manage the stakeholders. And then we will be moving how to leverage risk register to manage risks in May 19th. And then towards the middle of June, on June 16th, we'll be talking about how to and why use benefits registers in programs and portfolios. So RACI, risk register, and benefits registers, we'll be covering all those things as part of the risk management umbrella. So getting into the crux of the RACI, ultimately projects become successful because of the stakeholders. In my book recently, I talked about this, and I said, there is a saying that goes like, tell me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. And similarly, I say that, tell me about the stakeholders you have identified the projects, and I'll tell you whether your project is going to be successful or not. And when you look at the foundational principles of stakeholders are anybody who is going to have a positive or a negative influence on the project, or who's going to be positively or negatively influenced by the project outcomes. So you need to truly identify, analyze, and engage and manage the particular stakeholders throughout the life cycle that people talk about. But ultimately, it's the people. the people that make the project successful. And that's something that I really want to make sure that everybody understands, because if we do not engage properly with people at different points in times at the appropriate level, then we are not going to see the success that the project really deserves, or we will be spending more time trying to manage the projects rather than proactively manage the project. So when you look at this, why projects fail, there are a number of different reasons people associate for project failure, like in poor scheduling, not having a proper business case or inaccurate business case to begin with. Communication seems to be the top of everything. Unclear objectives to the team. Compromises in the quality, ambiguous responsibility, inefficient estimation, vague process, management priorities. Pretty much everything is as a given one. I don't need to elaborate on each and every one of them. But if you look at each and every one of them, towards the end is going to be the people. Somebody is not necessarily providing the right level of information or being engaged at the right level to provide the right level of support. Right, the impact is going to be too huge. Recently, PMI reported that for every 20 seconds, projects lose about $1 million. Every 20 seconds. This is a study that PMI did across a number of different organizations throughout the globe, and concluded that particular result. When you look at the detail behind that, there is a lot of things that come up. So at the very top, you will see that projects are completed on time or within budget and within scope and all those things. There are a couple of notes over here. One is the green, which is champions who are doing it well, and the blue, which is going to be the people that are not necessarily doing it well. So when you look at these things, they come up to be the top. But when you are looking from the bottom up, 8% of the people prioritize development of the skill set of the executive sponsors. And then, fewer people actually development of the strategic and business management skills, prioritize the development of the technical skills, development of the leadership skills. So when you look at this, there is a lot of people management aspects that are, forgotten, or that are not done very effectively. And it's there that the champions are doing very well. So stakeholders, understanding who they are, what they are capable of, and how they are supporting, how they are impacted on all those things is very critical for projects to succeed. Now, the requirements that we all document for our product, our projects, our program, and our portfolios, and all those things, they ultimately come from stakeholders. The stakeholders could be internal, external, and we can go into those details at a later point. But when you look at this, there is a category of how we are looking at the requirements from different stakeholders. At the very top is going to be strategy. Strategy is, the competitive advantage that we are going to create. And from that particular competitive advantage, we are looking at what are some of the things that we really want to do in the portfolio. And those two things are the ones that are actually going to talk about the measurable organizational value. And from there, we are looking at the product, and the product is getting broken down into a roadmap and multiple releases and things like that. And that's going to be the focus of the minimum viable product, the MVP. And from there, we are moving into the number of iterations. Sometimes people call it sprints in the Scrum methodology. And then we are going into the day, which is going to be the daily stand-up or things like that. So when you look at this, you are looking at the minimally marketable feature, MMF. So this is how things are getting mapped. But all this information come ultimately from stakeholders, right? Without the stakeholders, we are not going to be able to do this. Now, add a little bit of complexity to this. The actual information from the stakeholders are not necessarily going to be clearly identified, because they are progressively elaborated, so it could become complicated. They do something and then they find out that things are not right, and as a result they have to do something else and things like that. And then sometimes, with the whole concept of new information that we are bringing in, like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and a lot of technical complexities associated with that, with product penetration and market diversification. When you add all those things, we definitely have to do some experiments, right? This has been there even in the phased approach of project management principles, right? And then we are evolving more and more with a lot of compliance, a lot of standards, a lot of regulations are coming up. And as a result, we truly have to understand how what we are doing is actually fitting into the equation. Example is the digital signature requirements for some of those life sciences and healthcare companies and financially regulated companies. And now we have to integrate the needs of not just the technical elements alone, but the commercial requirements from the customers, the business requirements that needs to be present from a compliance standpoint, and the technical elements that needs to come, as well as the process related elements that we have to add. So we have to look at multiple different things and ensure that we are integrating them. As a result, we have to actually invest in a lot of tools and processes that make our job a little easier, as part of our requirements, traceability, auditability, and all those things. So when you look at all these elements, it is a lot more involved when you look from strategy to the different levels of the onion. Now add a number of different stakeholders to the mix. When you add a lot of different stakeholders and people are not necessarily wired with the same information, and they come with different alternative thinking and subject matter expertise and all those things, and different goals and different objectives. So when you add all those things, obviously requirements are not necessarily going to be all the time completely fleshed out, and that's all the more reason why we need to make sure that we manage the stakeholders right. And so when you look at the analysis of the stakeholders, you have to look at it from different points. So I mentioned a few at the start of the webinar, trying to ensure that the right stakeholders are engaged at the right moment to the right extent. Now, what are those right things, Pete, right? So when you're identifying and analyzing the stakeholders, you got to say, who has the biggest network, right? How many different people are in that particular network that we really have to take into account. Their voice in influencing your support for the project, in governance and decision making and things like that. What are the strengths they bring to the table that we cannot live without? Or if we don't leverage that, we are going to create a lot of weaknesses for our projects. What types of resources the network of people can actually provide to us, resources meaning like in both people resources as well as the non-people resource like facilities, equipments, materials, infrastructure, supplies, and things like that. And the level of complexity in the project, inherent complexity, also the stage the project is in. You don't want to involve, too early some two members who are not necessarily going to add value, but at the same time, you don't want to delay including them until it's the last minute, right? So what is the stage, the project lifecycle stage of the project, and when do you bring them, at what level do you bring them, and things like that. So when you look at all these different things, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind, and there are two different models that evolve from that. One is going to be the PII model. This is going to be the most everybody is familiar with, the power, interest, and influence that are actually being referred. And many people call this as the PI grid. The power, influence, or power, interest, or sometimes call it influence, interest grid, and things like that. And sometimes people say, I want to actually analyze all the three of them and include stakeholder cube, and expand additional things like stakeholder register, stakeholder maps, and things like that. And these are good for small projects, because if you have maybe 10, 20, 30 stakeholders or stakeholder groups, you can actually work with them. But if you have a large initiative that requires a lot of different people, a lot of different entities, and all those things, this model is not necessarily scalable, and you go with what is called a salience model. Here, similarly, three important criteria comes up. One is going to be the power, and then the urgency with which we need to act, and then legitimacy, how much they should know at this particular point in time, the decisions that we are doing, and things like that. So this is when you have a larger group of people that you need to manage, that this model comes into play. So this is two different models, but at the end of the day, there is some conceptual framework as to how you can analyze as you are identifying the stakeholders more and more. Now, RACI is an important tool that comes into play over here, and oftentimes it's very less understood correctly, and many people are misusing it and abusing it at this point. So when you look at this from a RACI standpoint, I categorize them into two groups. One is going to be the R and A; those are very important. The one R is going to be the person that's going to be doing the work, And the A is going to be the single person answerable for the outcomes. Not many people, just one person ultimately liable for that outcome, right? That's one group. Okay. And now the second group is going to be the person that is going to give you expert guidance, like you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this, have you considered this, those kind of things. And then the groups of people towards the end that are actually consuming the products and requiring updates and things like that. So end consumers, or people at the end of their food chain, the help desk, service delivery, and all those members. All those people are supposed to be part of your stakeholder analysis and thinking process. Now, RACI is very easily said like this, but it has a little bit more than what we are talking about. So if you think of this as a launch pad, and a rocket actually going to the shape, the responsible working under the direction. So the R person is going to be working under the direction and guidance of somebody. Okay, and that could be the accountable person or a consultative person, but the accountable person is finally the ultimate person. The difference between responsibility and accountability is accountability includes responsibility, but responsibility does not include accountability. In other words, accountability cannot be shared. Responsibility can be, I can give it to other people and things like that, but accountability is not something that can be delegated. Right. Consultant is going to be the person who knows the knowledge, how much functional knowledge you have, cross-functional and multidisciplinary knowledge you are bringing, not only about the technology aspects of it, but also the strategic dimension, the business dimension, people dimension, the process dimension, a full rounded person, that full cross-functional person does not exist, but that's all the more reason why you have to consult more people. And then the end users. Who are the end users? How are they going to be using the system? What will they require to use the system? And things of that nature. And when you bring the cultural dimensions of and the generational dimensions to these groups, then you are changing how you will interface with them, and that directs you the stakeholder engagement approaches, the communication plan, and risk management, and all those elements that comes with that, right? So when you look at this, there are two additional pieces that are going to help the rocket actually be guided correctly, and those are going to be the operational strategy. What is the business mode? What are we trying to accomplish at the end? What's the end result going to look like? The final product, and how do you make it operational? It's not like giving something to the end result to somebody, but the end result is not something that is usable, right? The fitness for purpose to immediately be usable, that needs to be there. So operational excellence, those two elements have to come into play. So you have to look at all these different dimensions, and it's not like filling a simple table for who is responsible and who is accounted and all those things. So I have come up with a model of where potentially things can go wrong, and I want to make sure that we are able to understand RACI in depth a little bit before we move into different patterns that I have found out. So RACI ultimately is responsible, is useful for monitoring the engagement, right? When you're looking at who has to engage with you, you have identified somebody, but to what extent they are actually helping your project at this point, you need to understand that. So in my humble opinion, I always use RACI to say who matters more than what you know. So not necessarily the knowledge that person gives you, but also all the different network that they have to know. So it really have to come into play there. So let's take a look at the journey of the stakeholder. When I mean stakeholder, it could be any one of them, right? Internal, external, team members, all those management members and things like that. So when you look at this in two different models, the time horizon as well as their commitment level, at the very initial stages, they are going to be unaware of your project. When you discuss your project management plan or your, backlog grooming at the early stages, or just forming the team regardless of the framework, so they don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what the end result looks like. They are, coming together and beginning the process. As they are trying to understand a little bit, then they are becoming a little bit more resistant, or no, this will impact my work and what's in it for me, all those things. And then, you are slowly moving them towards the neutral. Okay, now I understand why we need this, why, what the business need, and all those things, right? And then as you are moving them to the next level, they are moving into the next level where, there's some amount of positive perception. They're feeling to adopt this product or process, the work that you are trying to do, and, it's formally getting incorporated, okay? As you are moving into the next level, then comes the actual highly committed, as they are really feeling the work product and how it is helpful for them and all those things. They are really taking a lot more pride at that point, and that's when they are truly, committed to this work and, trying to make things work. So when you look at this, the stakeholders have to be looked up multiple different ways. The group with the money, financial stakeholders that really have to fund this product, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the funding that is really required to keep everybody happy, then you're not going to be able to provide them the right tools and the right motivation to move forward, right? So that needs to be the group with the money, the group with the most influence. And I talked about this with the network, who has the most influence, like, that one person says yes or no, and then, a lot of people follow their lead. And the next one is going to be the devil's advocate. Like, I don't mean this in any negative connotation. It's like that alternative thinking, like, have we considered this other option? What if we do not do this? What could be the business impact of non-delivery? Things of that, black box thinking, in other words. And then the group with the biggest network, not necessarily with the influence, but with the biggest network. So QA group seems to be the biggest group. And, so anything that we do in terms of automation to our processes will actually impact them more. So that's the way to look at this. And towards the end of all, the customer service, the help desk, service delivery, or whatever that group is, that particular group that is actually going to take the work, deploy it into the production environment or into the hands of the customers, and handle the customer calls and things like that. And that's going to be another one. So you have to understand them from all these different angles before you can actually move forward with how you understand them. And when you look at this, these people are not going to be always the same. People move. Sometimes they may be very engaged and they'll be supportive, but something happens in their family, or they are looking forward to a different job, or they move to a different role within the same company, or a new person takes over that role. So when you look at this, these are people. That's the reason why I say people make the project successful. So these are now people. And so as soon as different people and different family equations and professional things are all actually put into the play over here, this curve is not necessarily going to be always going up. It's like a roller coaster ride. It can go up and it can go down. So every person in this particular focus could be completely different, right? So you may want to understand that particular thing in terms of the stakeholder journey as you are moving forward. So how do I assess the engagement at this point? So if you take those 5 different stages, these are the 5 different stages. You want to make sure that you are actually moving them in the curve, right, ahead of the curve. So what you have to do is a project manager, product manager, account manager, or you don't need to have a management title at all. So you may be a business analyst or more a scrum master, or or a product owner, or something like that, or just an individual architect or subject matter expert or things like that. So in either case, you need to have your own RACI in terms of, okay, what are the different stakeholders I'm thinking of? What is their current status in, current level of engagement, and what is your desired level of engagement for that particular stakeholder? So if, for instance, the stakeholder 1 is listed as unaware, that person does not even know what your project is, what the benefits of the project, why we are doing it now, what will happen if you don't do it, none of that. And your goal is to educate that individual to the extent that person is now supportive. That means there's a huge gap of your expectation of where that person is going to be and their current understanding of what the project is. Now, this is where you need to actually do a lot of homework, right? So, as you are bringing those persons closer and closer and closer, they're good. I can't say that everybody should be in the supportive or leading category. Sometimes, it could be the neutral too. Sometimes people will always be resistant. So I don't know. So, but your goal is to find out, how do I actually map this so that I'm able to have more and more work done productively, rather than spending my time and energy on, supporting my costs, right? So who needs to engage? and to what extent. You need to understand that as you are filling this, and that's where your homework comes into. And this is where RACI truly helps. Okay, now I don't want to engage everybody all the time. There are some people that are not necessarily required to be engaged at the level that I need to be engaging with, right? So when you look at this, I view RACI in a slightly different context. Instead of a linear architecture like this, I'm actually looking at this as a different way. So the responsible person gets the work done, but the responsible person cannot get the work done if there is no accountable person to cover for them. And if the responsible person cannot get the work done if there is no consulting expertise, somebody who's able to look after them in terms of uh, ideas, suggestions, risks, and all those things. And ultimately, through the accountable and consultative person, the responsible person should be able to reach out to other people to make sure that he or she is informed, right? And the responsibility and that honest now rests on the accountable and the consultative person, because otherwise the responsible person cannot do the job correctly or be set up for success. So I view this slightly differently. So when you look at this responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, ultimately the responsible person is the person that gets the work done. So if you think of your project management terms, the person that you are associated at the task level, or the person that is associated at the user story level, right? That's the person that is going to get the job done, right? You can say in an agile context, you will make sure that it is the entire team responsible, but still, not everybody is going to be working on all the user stories all the time, right? So accountable is going to be the ultimate answerable person, right? So he or she is the one who is going to say why the project failed, why the project did not fail, or why the project succeeded, what the project needs, and all those things. That person is going to take you know take the blame if there's something going wrong. It's not going to be the team's fault. It's going to be my fault if things don't go wrong, don't go right. Okay. And then next going to be the bringing the appropriate people under a consulting umbrella, okay, who are not going to do the work. A legal person or a compliance person will come back and say, I need this kind of an auditability, or I need this kind of a document filled, and things like that. It's not that that person is going to do the work, but that person is going to be that extra consulting eyes to make sure that you are doing it right, so that you are ultimately set up for success, right? Finally, the informed people, those that consume the work product and make sure that your product is actually getting the raving reviews in the feedbacks, right? So R is taking the full managed work, right? At the end of the day, you don't want to micromanage here. So you are basically letting that person know what is required of that individual and let them actually carry forward with the managed ownership. I'm going to sit back at this point. I have made sure that that person has the tools, the understanding of the requirements and everything else. And so I'm going to actually, let that person handle the work, right? That's what you can delegate. Right now, the next one is going to be A is liable for the success or the failure of the overall outcome. Right, we talked about this one before. Right, C needs to be the person who thinks the entire life cycle, not like, okay, architect it this way or test it this way. From the abstraction to the end result, how is this going to look like? So the benefit identification, benefit delivery, benefit transition, and the benefit sustenance, the whole 9 yards, right? And then finally, the other person is going to be the value, the voice of the customer, right? How am I actually, using this product? In what way it could be better? In what way it is not helping my cause? Or, what are some of the user interface or performance or stability or security, related functionality that can be, made better? So RACI requires one to think differently. It's not just, how do I assign the task? But instead, it makes one person to think differently with a preemptive focus, which means before problems happen, I need to identify and potentially have a game plan for governance and decision making. Like governance is focusing more on what to do, when to do, and how to do, and all those things. And then decision making supports the governance in terms of how the work gets, the decision gets done, right? So an example of a RACI looks like this. If I were to say, get funding for the project, the sponsor is accountable. right? The project manager is responsible to make sure that the the sponsor gets the funding, right? Both of them can consult the engineer for what kind of requirements needs to be present for the right level of funding, and the help desk person may be informed, right? Gather the estimates. Now, project manager is accountable, engineer is responsible, the sponsor could be consulted. So you see, the role keeps changing all over the place. And then the delivery per product specification, understanding customer needs, things are constantly changing over here, right? And now for one specific activity, different people become responsible, different people become accountable, and all those things. This is how things move. This is the reason why we always say together everyone achieves more. That is standing for the team, right? So things go wrong when this happens, right? You do a lot of things. So I have 8 different patterns, and I have broken them into 2 groups. The first group is I call a blame game. This is like too many cooks spoil the soup. I'm sure you have heard that expression. But here there is a reasonable amount of strategy, but strategic execution is falling apart. As a result, operational excellence is not necessarily doing well. The continuous focus is not there. So the focus on the team level is going to be, I'm lucky today. Let's look what tomorrow brings. We'll always fix it in the next iteration. We haven't thought all these things through. We will always fix it in the next iteration. There is always next iteration as a catch-all, right? And not enough systems level thinking. Like, systems level thinking is going to be looking at what's the success criteria, what will be the entry criteria, what will the end product look like, all those needs and impact analysis needs to be done. So when you don't do this, you can put the RACI together, but the RACI is going to be lopsided and things will, start shifting completely differently. How could this potentially manifest, right? When you look at this, the symptoms are going to be, first, too many R's. When you look at that grid that I showed you before, people put too many R's. So for every task, there are like, so many tasks, R owners associated. So that means high task ambiguity. So who is supposed to get the work done? Who is primary responsibility? Who is secondary responsibility? So we don't know. As long as somebody gets their stuff done, I'm not going to worry about who gets it done or not. So there is no ownership here at all, right? Task level ownership, team level ownership, that's missing. And what do? We end up having too many meetings. So what do we have to do, and how do we have to resolve this? When is it supposed to? So schedules are slipping. The user stories are not getting completed. Tasks are not properly broken down, and no understanding of who needs to get what done by when, and things like that. And so the lack of ownership means everything is falling apart, right? And that's one of the major problems with too many R's. And you will see this happen a number of times. The next one is going to be too many A's. The way we try to avoid this is, let's make sure everybody is accountable. No, not everybody is accountable, because not everybody is going to collectively as a big team in front of the management steering committee and say why our product did not fire. We're not going to be having that kind of a discussion. So which means a lack of leadership. Somebody is not able to actually own the responsibility in terms of the outcome management, right? As a result, they have no commitments. If you have too many years, I will think like, it's your job, and you will think it's my job, and neither one of us get the job done, right? That's not acceptable too. So lack of commitment. We just hope that, somebody gets this stuff. The next one is going to be too much power struggle. When you put too many years, it means like, I don't want to give up my power. I am ultimate deciding authority. I cannot let, somebody needs to actually be that one accountable owner, and everybody else have to, have some process of how we will dissolve conflicts. It's not there too much power struggle. And these are epidemic, right? The next one is going to be, the way we will solve this is no R's at all. Why put too many R's? No put R. Which means inadequate resource management. We don't have the proper skills assignment. We don't know whether that person is able to do it or not. And so we leave it, and we basically go back and say, who wants to do it? If that person is going to take it on, we will let that person handle it. If that person fails, well, they failed, right? So lack of inadequate, resource management thoughts. And then, lack of engagement outcomes. Ultimately, if we don't do this, what's the business impact? We need to understand that at the end of the day, if we don't deliver the 200 story points that we say we are committing to, what would be the business impact? That needs to be understood. That's all the more reason why you have to mix and match some of the must to do stories, should to do stories, could to do stories, and won't do stories. You have to mix and match those things. And people are checked out mentality, like it's not my job, I don't need to do this. That kind of a problem is coming up, so no ownership is there, right? The other way to look at this is no A at all. We have a lot of R's, but no A at all. This is like too much risk exposed. We're not having one ultimate person who is responsible for ensuring everything is getting done. So we all are working, but at the end of the day, there is no funding for the project. How can we sustain, right? And as a result, since nobody is watching us, things slip. Quality compromises are coming up, and it's okay to do a couple of errors and things like that. And we look at probability analysis to say, well, this is not the most important thing. How often it's going to impact us and things like that, and lack of productivity as a result. If you don't get done, it's okay, nobody's watching you, right? So these are major problems. So these are all basically telling accidents are waiting to happen. If things are not haven't happened, then it's just too lucky for you, right? So then a way to resolve some of these things, how do you address the responsibility issues? Give primary responsibility to one person. At the end of the day, there needs to be commitment to delivery, right? Even in agile approaches, we have commitment driven planning. It's not always iteration driven planning. There's also commitment driven planning. So think about the primary responsibility that we have to associate with. The second one is going to be incorporate transition planning. Nothing is considered ready until it can be consumed by the person in the next. So if you say that you're preparing food on the food completely, if the other person cannot eat it, then it's not considered food. Right. Same thing, if you have developed something, but it's not ready for it, the testers cannot actually move forward because there is no proper unit testing done, then it's not ready. Right. The next one is going to be think of succession planning. What if that person is not going to be there? Right. You need to have a backup. For many reasons. What if that person does not show up? Wins the lottery and never shows up. So you need to have a backup plan. So this is all the more reason why you think of a secondary person, like, okay, this person is primarily responsible, but we create a secondary person with the same thing. So we are optimizing the resources at this point. And this is all the more reason why you need proper resource allocation. So even in project management terms, you will basically say this person is 70% allocated to this, 20% allocated to that, things of that nature. So that process has to be continuously present. Okay, that's the responsibility approaches. The next one is going to be accountability issues. Accountability is almost always associated with the outcome, the end result, right? So when you look at this, look at the capability. Are these people the right kind of people that really want to do this? I'm not talking about skills. Do they have the attitude and aptitude to actually get the work done? Like, the continuous improvement mentality, their ability to actually take on some leadership roles. So deliberate ambiguity will be present. Not everything is going to be completely defined for you to continuously move forward. And their ability to be consultative in other groups and other areas and brings that experience to you. Right. The next one is going to be the skills. What kind of skills do they have? Do they have multidisciplinary thinking? Like, are you able to think legal? Are you able to think compliance? Are you able to think, testing? Are you able to think the benefit delivery? So multiple things that needs to be present. So the consultative roles obviously goes into the value delivery approach. What kind of value I'm giving? So continuously building everything else. And delivery through people. At the end of the day, project management or product management is all about delivering through others, delivering through people, right? And so how are you actually, building on that particular motivation, team management, empowerment skills, right? And third, how competent you are. Competencies are yearned, not learned, right? The more you try it, the more you will get better at this, right? And that's when you are looking at operational excellence. If I do this, that group will suffer. If I do this, we need to have this level of documentation. We need to actually start thinking more about risks. So you're trying to bring all these things into the whole group, and this whole cycle repeats as you are developing this. So that's what accountability is. So start looking at all these different elements and say, is that the right person to actually take this accountable ownership? If not, you may have to change the project manager or the product manager or the scrum master or the team leader or whoever it is, right? The blame game resolutions, when you do this right, the blame game resolution at the responsibility level, you are trying to ask yourself, do we know if the R owners have the details, all the details required to deliver, and the expectations of delivery? Like, what is considered success? Do they have the right tools and techniques? The next one is the same R owners. Do they have a good understanding of the business impact of non-delivery? In other words, if I do not do this, the impact to the project is this. The impact to the organization is this. The impact to the customer is this. Are they able to understand that? If not, there is no commitment, right? Same thing with the accountable owners. Are the A owners able to communicate at various levels? They should be able to talk to the team managers and team members, as well as to the management members. So they should be able to talk up, down, and sideways, internal and external, right? Do the A owners have enough risk response? Do they understand what is a risk and what are all the potential things that could go wrong, and have an approach to mitigate that proactively, rather than when it happens, I'll figure it out, right? Do they have the approach correctly, risk response properly figured out, right? So those are things that you have to consider regardless of the framework. It doesn't matter whether it is traditional project management or agile or safe or DSDM or extreme programming or DevOps or whatever be the model. You have to start thinking in terms of how do I deliver the value, right? Now, when you look at this, you are building systems thinking at both people level and the process level, right? It's going to be, how do I make sure that the process helps the people, and how do I make sure that I get the people to develop the right process? So it's like a symbiotic, event, right? And build communication skills across these individuals to ensure that they are able to engage right people, empower them at the appropriate moment, and enable them for change. Right? How do I do this? This is pretty much how you are trying to do this if you address some of those responsibility and accountability issues, right? And the other set of patterns, as a second set of patterns, is going to be flipping the thing in a different way. So they have right mentality, right way to do things like that, but the strategy is struggling, right? The culture, the whole thing is struggling over there, and that's I call above my pay grade kind of a thing. This is not in my job description. It's not my cup of tea. I didn't know it was expected of me. If only I had known this, I would have solved this problem this way, and things of that nature. And we need to avoid that pattern too. And how does that manifest? The symptoms that I have picked up on are these things: mixed roles. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know whether this person is a responsible person or an accountable person, so I'm going to put RA, AR, all those things. Now, if I am responsible for doing certain work and I'm also the accountable person, what will happen to me? Hey, if I'm supposed to do it and I didn't do this, who is going to, fire me or hire me or, question me? Me. I'm going to question myself. No, it's okay. Then I'll actually, downgrade my bar, lower my bar so that, I will do this right. I was planning to do this, but something else came up, so I did not do it. As a result, it doesn't get done, but that's okay. We'll figure it out in the next iteration. Right? So it's not my cup of tea, those kind of things. So RA brings bias, right? Internal bias. The next is RC says optional work. If I'm supposed to be responsible, but I'm also consultative for the same activity, C means like I don't need to do the job. R means I have to do it. Which one takes precedent? I can basically say, well, I don't have time to do this, and I was pulled into that meeting. I didn't do that, and so I'm fine with that. So it makes it optional, which means it introduces career slips. And the AC removes commitment. A means I'm liable, committed. C means I'm consultative. And so the commitment is missing. Then I will switch back to my in a consultative role and say, well, I was only thinking about this. I was not thinking that it was in my job description to own this. And the CI shares no expertise at all. I'm only supposed to be informed. I don't need to, go learn, attend webinars, or read a book, or go to a conference and bring new information, innovation. Nothing. I'm supposed to just do my job. If you didn't tell me what I'm supposed to do, then I'm not going to do this. Right? There is no innovation. There is no creativity that comes up. So mixed roles have a lot of problems. So you want to avoid all of those symptoms, right? When you look at the next one, is going to be, instead of putting mixed roles, I'll basically solve the other extreme. Like, no, I will leave it empty, which means too much just-in-time planning. I will do it just when I need it. And then you will basically send out a meeting, and that person may not be the right person to be present in the meeting, or that person may not have the decision authority or delegation power or whatever it is, and that person will come into the meeting and will waste the meeting because decisions cannot be made, and no quality commitment. At the end of the day, what is the expected commitment to the quality? And somebody will not be engaged, somebody will not be possibly doing the proper testing or regression testing mixed out, and as a result, it goes out, and customer finds out escaped defect. So quality slips. Inefficient leadership, right? So I don't know who is supposed to lead it, so I'll just let it go. If somebody does not, speak up, then they are not interested, right? So I take that thing. The other one is toxic culture. The company culture may be so toxic that we are basically saying, like, I don't want to create trouble, so I'm just going to let it go. And if nobody wants to hear about this, or nobody is taking ownership for this, then this is not getting done, right? That's not acceptable too. So these are all patterns that you really want to recognize and make sure that you are addressing them. Then lots of C's. Everybody is a consultant, right? Which means it is ineffective leadership, not inefficient leadership. It's ineffective leadership. We are not doing the right thing, right? And we are not associating for this kind of job, what kind of a skill is expected, and are we associating the right person with the right skill set in the task? Are we providing appropriate support if that person is just trying for the very first time or experimenting with new technology and things like that? Risky project without any value. So everybody wants to do something, and so there is no proper definition because everybody wants to take the project in different angles, and there is no outcome orientation at all. And so everybody wants to do whatever they want to do, and there is no clear process. Right? How are we going to evaluate the value? What is the benefit delivery? What's the business impact? And none of that is going to be completely understood. And so everybody wants to actually pitch in and do something. The flip side is, let's make everybody informed. That means teams are not getting committed to who do I engage, because there are too many eyes. And then they set up a huge meeting with 100 people present in the meeting, and they don't know at what level they should be providing input or providing support and all those things, and they come and eat the pizzas and go away, and there's not much commitment. We don't tell them, I'm going to do this and I need support from you. I need the voice of customer, I need the feedback, and nothing of that sort is there. And missing innovation, we're not basically saying like, I want a new idea to come out from each and every one of those groups. So what are the mechanisms? And then we are engaging office politics and not necessarily having proper change management when new ideas and innovation thoughts are coming up. And people get demotivated and checked out because what's the point in giving any feedback, because it's not going to be anyway incorporated, right? So all these are symptoms that manifest in different ways and actually address the problem. So how do I address some of the consulting issues? Benefit delivery. At the end of the day, focus on what is it that we are going to give towards the end. Don't mix expertise with getting work done. They are two different things. Roles and responsibilities are two different things, right? Active listening, making sure that people are providing input at the same time, are able to actually listen to you and look at other things. Hey, have you considered these kind of problems, risks, and things like that? So proactive communication. And then knowledge mining. How do I continuously focus on improving our existing talent as well as the existing processes, right? It comes with how do you engage different experts to energize, empower, and enable. Putting some expectations even on the subject matter experts, right? How do I address some of those informed issues? The people that are informed. At the one end, champions early adoption. Make sure that you are involving them at least at the early stages to say, we don't have all information, we are just getting started, but we need your input, and here is a forum for you to provide the input and collect that input, and the tools, whatever you are using, should facilitate that. So both for requirements grooming as well as continuous risk management processes. The next one is going to be, it helps you to lead factual decision making. They will be able to provide a lot of data points, like your particular flow in which you have designed the process. Makes it inconvenient for me to answer the person on the phone. A lot of that data can be gathered, and you are looking at operational excellence and continuous improvement as to how you can continuously groom the product backlog and the requirements. And then sustains the benefit and value. When you are doing these kind of things, you are actually looking at how do I sustain the benefit value, and that brings cross-disciplinary collaboration with different people. And this is pretty important as you are moving into subsequent levels of program and portfolio planning, because operational considerations come into play for programs and portfolios. So starting with the end in mind as to how do I make sure that the benefits are going to be consumed. So ultimately, when you put this proper RACI together, we are in this together. That communication has to be relayed to everybody who is working on this project, which means what are the impediments to delivery? Which means tell me the risks. What are we looking at, right? The next one is what are the things that we are not even considering? That we are not end all be all. So you be our eyes and ears. Tell us what are the things that we should be considering, what are we not considering. We're not saying that we will do all of that you are asking, because we will go through our own prioritization protocol, but at least it's a forum for you to provide and engage. The next one is how do we improve value continuously, right? So when you look at these things, you are looking at people, product, and process continuously. You're not looking at each one of them in isolation, but in a combined fashion. When you do this, you're looking at the benefits throughout the product, the benefit delivery life cycle, right? And you're not ignoring consumers, because the power of plurality comes into play in terms of how much network-wise they will be able to represent, and that is coming through to the forefront. So some of the summary over here, RACI failure patterns. At the very top level, I have the blame game related problems. There are going to be too many A's, no accountabilities at all, and no R's and too many R's. Those things are all patterns that will actually contribute to the blame game related problems. And the next one is going to be the above my pay grade kind of thing. That's going to be the mixed roles that I talked to about, empty cells, or lots of C's and lots of Y's. None of these 8 patterns are really conducive. And when you put the activities and the appropriate owner in place, think of these patterns and make sure that your RACI is built in such a way that it is going to be a powerful tool for you to engage the stakeholders. Okay, that brings me to the closure of this webinar at this point. So if you have any content related questions, please don't hesitate to email me. My email address is sriram@inflectra.com. And if you have any course administration specific questions, please reach out to Ms. Tia at marketing@inflectra.com. So please stay tuned for the next one. If you haven't actually registered for the second webinar in the series, please make sure that you are connecting and registering with that. With that, I will actually move to the question and answer session right now. Okay, so there is one question that has come up. How often do you revisit the RACI metrics to ensure stakeholders are properly identified? This is a very good question. I'm not going to say it's going to be every day, right? People don't change on a daily basis, but you need to have 2 patterns that you have to keep in mind. One is going to be your own operating cadence. So depending upon how much work you are doing and what your level of commitment to the product is, and all the things that you are doing, at least you should visit it every 2 weeks. The golden rule basically says, we have to visit everything in 2 weeks. That's why we even say 2-week iterations and 2-week rules and all those things, right? So you want to, at least eyeball it quickly to say, has people moved, has people changed, have I missed anything, and all those things. So how often do you identify risk? As often as possible. So every time a risk is identified, you will be actually going to this. You need to have your own operating cadence to actually go back every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, whatever that one is that fits into your product and your personal approach. The third thing is going to be any major event that happens in the organization, like an organizational staff reassignment, or somebody leaving, or a sponsor actually leaving the organization, or somebody within your team actually changing their role. So anytime people within your project organization changes, you will be going and visiting this. But that's going to be far in between. So that's definitely one thing, and something that is specific to your own operational cadence. And the third thing is going to be any project team assignment that identify new risks to you. So those are the 3 different ways I will basically say you have to go and revisit these things. Great question. All right, looks like there are no further questions to me. I hope this webinar was helpful in how to use the RACI correctly and what's the fundamental reason behind using it for proper stakeholder engagement. So the next one will be in middle of May. So please make sure that you are providing, you are registering for that, and let me know if you have any questions or any feedback. Thank you very much and have a good one.